Welcome to the Fireside Chat as part of the Fox Hollow. My name is Schuyler.
I'm Keelin, and this is our guest.
I'm the Reverend Oscar Sinclair.
Today we're talking about spiritual goals and our spiritual journey going forward into 2019. So this can be anything from practicing traditional religion to meditating to just finding time in your life to be introspective. So I wanted to ask you, Oscar, about the service for this morning. So we just got out of Sunday service, and it was really poignant, and we were talking about trust and talking about this idea of a covenant. So can you talk a little bit about your inspiration for the service and about what that means to you as part of the Unitarian Universalist faith tradition?
So there's a couple of different ways of thinking about this morning's service, and maybe we can come back to the part that it was an all ages service. But I think given the idea of spiritual goals, one of the things that's compelling to me about Unitarian Universalism is this idea that we are a covenantal people. For me, what that means is that we enter into agreements with each other about how we'll behave. But the fascinating thing about covenant, as we think about goals, is that covenants are aspirational. Covenants come with an understanding that they are agreements between imperfect people, and so chances are they're going to get broken. So a large part of covenant is, how do we call people back in? How do we say this is what our lives are committed to, even if we've stepped away for a moment? So the service this morning was talking about love and trust in the context of talking to a wide range of ages. And for me, that becomes talking about covenant, because that's how we, as a community, express our trust in each other and express our love for each other in the community, as we have an agreement of how we'll belong.
Wow, that's really profound. And I at least felt in the service that even though it was a little bit smaller today because we kind of had a snowy day, that there was a lot of thought in the room about how we might want to go forward and covenant with each other in the church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, it's always a good service when people laugh and people cry and people think. Like, if you hit those three bases on any given Sunday. I'm not sure we had many tears today, but that's fine. You don't always need to go there.
I had a few for you.
Yeah.
I cry so easily, it seems like.
Yeah. It was a good service, though. And it's separate from the topic. It is a fascinating thing to put together services that are all ages services, because those have a whole different set of challenges to them. How do you take complex ideas like covenant or like love and say them in ways that can be understood equally by a 6-year-old and a 60-year-old.
Right.
And that feels like a growing edge for, I think, most ministers. It's a really odd challenge. Entertainment has shown us one way to do it. It's sort of the Shrek moments where you can be telling a story and have some aside in it that is there for the adults to keep their attention, but also doesn't impact the story that the kids are hearing. And so that those moments are harder to write than most ones.
Yeah. That's very true. That's a tough challenge to keep everybody engaged so that they're not bored or don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
So I want to circle back to making spiritual goals. And before we started, I was alluding to one of my spiritual goals for this year is to kind of step back into the church, since I had taken a little bit of a break during law school. So like this morning, being more involved through worship associates, but also attending more church services as well. I know that we get really busy and sometimes we don't make it to church every Sunday morning. So having a measurable goal of saying, I'm going to go to church for half of the Sundays in the month. It's not too many. I'm not trying to hit every single Sunday, but to just try to do it more. And that's a measurable goal that can be like, I succeeded at that goal or I failed at that goal this month, and figure out what went wrong. If it's just really easy not to roll out of bed in the morning. But that's just one of those more grounded spiritual goals. But I also want to talk about more spiritual goals. So meditation, and our ongoing theme that we've discussed in a few episodes previously, especially last week's episode, we talked about self-love and how important it is to be introspective, how important it is to love yourself fully, because it's hard to conceivably succeed at any of the goals that you want to in 2019 or beyond if you don't love yourself first. Like how difficult it is to achieve a health and fitness goal or a vocational goal if you don't have that foundation of being your own best friend.
Yeah.
Which is what, Keelin, you have some really great insights into your own journey.
Yeah, and my own finding myself, self-love, self-care in general. And that has a lot of finding yourself, and self-love is rooted in your spirituality, at least in my opinion. Because whether you meditate to find yourself or to relax or just for self-care in general, that helps. And going to church, finding a community that cares about you. Like one of my goals, not really one of my goals, but that I am thinking about now, is that I need to start coming to church more often, because I showed up this morning and so many people were like, oh my gosh, haven't seen you in a while, how have you been? I'm like, oh yeah, haven't seen you since like Christmas. So I should probably start thinking about coming in more often for specifically the community as well as spiritual growth, because I'm at that stage in my life where probably need it more than others.
Yeah, you're young, you're trying to figure out the next steps on your journey, and those are tough questions.
And they're tough questions that aren't going to have answers right away. One of the things that I tell actually a lot of folks in this office is that spiritual practices like meditation, like prayer, like coming to church, are work, and they don't work the first time you try them. So I hurt my knee in the fall. I dinged it when I was at the gym, and for about 3 months I had to switch from weightlifting to swimming, because apparently my knee is no longer 18 years old and it needs time to heal from that. Just last week I went back and shockingly cannot do the things that I could do 3 months ago when I was well in practice. I think it can be a mistake that we make pretty easily to think that our spirituality isn't like that.
Yeah.
Right.
The teachers of the church, church with a big capital C, called these things spiritual disciplines. That there is something about the repetition of spirituality that allows you to get deeper. And that's one of the things that I think we can struggle with in our tradition, and in our age frankly, that spirituality, almost more than any part of our lives, except maybe training for a marathon, is a thing where you have to put in repetitive time for it, and it takes months sometimes before you see any result, and that's fine.
Yeah, that's what everything that we've been talking about.
That's how most things work.
Yes,
especially goals.
Is an investment, right?
When I was in my early 20s, I wasn't obviously in seminary yet, but I was rejoining a UU church, and it was hard to get there on Sunday morning. So a friend of mine and I said, we're just going to carpool every Sunday, and we will drive together. And on the Sundays when I didn't want to go, she was showing up at my door saying, "So we're going, right?"
Yeah, accountability.
Well,
yeah.
Guess I got to put on pants, and vice versa. And I don't know. Had we not had that accountability to each other, I don't know that it would have stuck. I think I would have gone for a couple months, and then life happened.
Right.
But because I had that expectation of I'm there every Sunday, whether or not it's easy, then when life did happen in my early 20s, I was expecting to be there on Sunday. And it takes work, and and sometimes life happens and you hurt your knee and you got to step back from whatever you're doing and try something else for a little while and then come back. That's part of it too.
Going along with that too, it's like you had somebody to hold you accountable and actually go with you. Just getting it out there and telling somebody that this is your goal or that you want to do that can hold you more accountable. You don't have to have a gym buddy or a church buddy, but just somebody to tell things to.
Yeah, and help build those healthy habits. And healthy habits, again, can be anything from eating healthier food to exercising to working on those career goals, making a career change, and then, of course, to building and enhancing your own spirituality. Like, meditation is one of those things that a lot of people have to build on, because nobody expects you to sit down and be able to meditate for half an hour.
Right.
Starting off, like, that's excessive and it's hard. That's a huge leap. 5 minutes. Just start with 5 minutes a day with meditation and then build on that. If it's something that is valuable to you, you'll feel it and then you'll be able to increase that time. But expecting too much from yourself at the very beginning is self-defeating, and it's going to be really tough to keep up those healthy spiritual habits if you're putting too much pressure on yourself to succeed and be too ambitious. It's just going to backfire.
Yep.
And so I learned how to meditate, and I guess started meditating in 6th grade through the church in RGL. And I still don't sit down for hours on end meditating, even though I've been doing it for a while. It's still not something that takes up a ton of time, because that's not how I roll. That's not my spirituality and the time that I need to spend on that specific practice.
See, for me, I would love to do it more frequently in the morning, because I think it would be a helpful practice to just wake up instead of waking up late and having a hectic morning, to actually wake up early. I have to take a medication that I can't eat for a while, so often what I do now is take the medicine and go back to sleep and then wake up an hour later, but it doesn't help and it doesn't make me feel awake and rejuvenated. It would be nice just to take the medicine and be awake, and then use that time to kind of clean up the kitchen and meditate and, do some of the other things that I would like to do as part of a morning routine. And right now, I have been using some sleep meditation to help get to sleep if I'm not tired at night, which a guided sleep meditation is a great way to meditate and rest and get to sleep, and also have kind of a spiritual way to get rid of all of that noise in your head and you're really stressed out. And so I do recommend that for people who have insomnia or who are just really stressed out, because it can just be really helpful. But I think that taking a little bit of time to do meditation or even exercise, a lot of people say that like exercising is a form of meditation, because you're not thinking while you're running or you're lifting weights. You're really focused on your body. So at work we just implemented we have a health and wellness committee, and we just got a grant to have yoga and meditation and more lectures on how to take care of your mental health and your body health. And then I think I've mentioned before, but I also do Tai Chi, and I think that that's another form, like a martial art, a form of focusing on your body and kind of clearing out your headspace, but while still moving your body. So if you're more of a kinesthetic type of person, sitting and meditating isn't really your thing, then finding one of those activities may be very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So something that you were talking about your morning routine, I would love to be good at yoga and get into that. I like the idea of it with like stretching your body out and, morning yoga sounds great. Great idea,
core,
right?
Or realizing you don't have much of a core to begin with.
Yeah.
That's
but instead of reaching for my phone first thing in the morning and checking whatever messages or whatever's on there, instead I take like 5-10 minutes where I just stretch. Like when I first wake up in bed, I start stretching, and then I slowly get out of bed and stretch some more, and then go to the bathroom, and then I check my phone. So it's that like first 10 minutes of my day where I'm de-stressing, getting ready for the day, and like stretching my body out so that I'm not, sore. And
You're not stressed out about social media
yeah,
immediately when you wake up.
or like worry about all these people that I need to talk to or emails that I need to respond to. I'm like, let's just stretch it out and get ready for the day.
One of the things that I've been thinking about and working on as a practice for the last couple of years is how to integrate spirituality with the whole of life, right? Because if the first step is practice, is saying I'm going to spend this half an hour in a spiritual discipline each day, and whether that's meditation or prayer or Lectio Divina, like any number of disciplines work, that's an important step. And one of the things that the real, I would say, masters of this stuff constantly emphasize is that spirituality shouldn't be contained within a set period of time in your day. Thich Nhat Hanh says that as you're chopping carrots can be a meditation. Or Paul writes in Thessalonians that we should pray without ceasing. Those are actually two ways, I would say, of saying the same thing. That spirituality and spiritual practice can be infused throughout our day. So, as we're exercising or sitting at the desk trying to figure out what this next sermon is going to be, or how to appropriately analyze our attendance figures at this church over the last 2 years, and remembering how to use formulas in Excel.
Oh no!
That was Thursday. Finding ways to make that an experience that's not divorced from spirituality, but incorporates a sense of being connected to something greater than yourself. I'm not going to claim I have a good answer for that one, because it's something that I'm actively trying to do at this point. But it is a good challenge in each moment to say what in this moment takes me beyond myself.
Yeah.
And it's, just letting it sink in.
Yeah.
That's basically what we're trying to figure out today. Trying to answer that question. There aren't necessarily answers.
Yeah.
But just some ideas to reflect on. And I think that ultimately is what we're trying to figure out for our own lives and for any of the listeners who are listening in. What do you need to live a fulfilling life? What do you need to infuse into your daily practice to feel whole?
Right. Well, so I wonder if we want to back up a little bit, and because we've been talking about spirituality for the last couple minutes, but as you come into this conversation, when we talk about spirituality, what's your understanding of what that means?
That's a good question. I'm fairly vague. Growing up in a Unitarian Universalist church, I have a very broad understanding of what spirituality is. It's it's not just rigid like going to church every Sunday and praying. It's smiling at somebody on the street, or just acts of kindness, or when I decide to do something that helps the environment. To me, of course, that is all linked back to our 7 principles: compassion, advocating for a democratic system of fairness, treating people with respect. Like, those all come back to Unitarian Universalism. And so for me, basically every action that I do is an extension of, do I think that this is a good thing or a bad thing? Like, weighing the morality of those decisions. Maybe not thinking about that in the moment with every action, but basically every action has that spiritual component, where of like, am I helping somebody or am I hurting them in this situation? And that's complicated but simple at the same time.
Okay.
There's also a difference between spirituality or being spiritual and being religious. They're different. Because I wouldn't consider myself a very religious person, but I would consider myself more spiritual, in the way that you were talking about, like sharing kindness and compassion and like living with those like spiritual morals, I guess, rather than me like not necessarily like.
But what makes those morals spiritual?
Versus like
morals.
Religious, or
no, just versus
philosophical.
Morals. Yeah, versus
general.
Ethics and morals.
I don't know.
I guess maybe it's because I guess I associate them more with spiritual, because that's what, growing up at the church, those are the things that were taught to me at church. Rather than like different morals that my parents taught me and that I found over time. That's not, they kind of play into my whole, just my whole belief system in general. But I guess I kind of take those more with the church morals and spiritual morals versus outside, maybe what I learned at school and that kind of thing.
And to me, I feel like I am religious because I practice Unitarian Universalism as a religion. All of the rituals that are involved with that, I had an experience once where one of my professors in undergrad, he was somewhat familiar with the church, and I wish I could like go back in time and like have this conversation, because you never know what to say like in a moment when somebody says something off-putting to you, but he told me that my religion wasn't a religion, and I'm like, wait, what? But to me it is, and I was a religious studies major, and to me as I identify with it, which I feel counts for something, that I identify with UUism as a religion, and then also just from like the objective standards that you would say that it has a ritual, there are beliefs and practices, and there are community, and things are passed down through the generations, and we have texts that we refer to. So I'd say that all of those, it would therefore qualify as a religion objectively. But then, from personally, I was like, how are you telling me that my religion is not a religion? So if I could go back in time, I would challenge him on that, instead of just sitting there kind of dumbfounded that my professor was telling me that.
And how is his religion any more valid, or how is his religion a religion?
I don't think he was religious. I think he was familiar with it from an agnostic atheist perspective, but to me, I'm a religious atheist. So I don't find those two challenging each other. They can coexist within our framework, because that's how our religion works. That we don't have to be dogmatic, and that's what I love about it, that we're pluralistic, so you can be atheist and also be religious at the same time. So for me, it's not just spiritual, but I think that those spiritual practices and actions that we take in our life are, to me, also religious ones, that they kind of coincide and live in the same area. But I'd understand where some people, like that professor or other people who follow other religions, would see my religion as more spiritual and less religious. But and that's a different experience, because you identify and grew up in the church, but you feel more about UUism as a spirituality rather than a religion. So everybody's going to interpret that a little bit differently.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I should own sort of where I'm coming from. Is it's literally my business
Good job.
to say that we're a religion. So I'm not going to be particularly ambiguous on this. So the root of the word religion comes from the Latin to bind. The question of how we define what a religion is a question that sociologists have been trying to figure out for years. I learned in undergraduate the Clifford Geertz definition of a system of signs and symbols that deals through ritual with issues of ultimate concern, and it's a paragraph and a half long definition. And you can still come up with 4 or 5 world religions that don't fit that, but are definitely religions. Here's the thing, to bring us all the way around. For me, the question of religion is this question of what are we committed to? That's this word, to bind. So a religion asks us to commit ourselves to something. And that, in Unitarian Universalism, is covenant. That's what we're bound to. We say we're going to be a part of this community, and in being a part of this community, we will act this way. That's a much different kind of commitment than majority religions in the United States that say you are a Christian if you believe that God gave His only begotten Son.
Or you have a covenant with God because of the community that you're part of, such as with Judaism. and that kind of covenant?
Yeah, I would say that much like Judaism, Unitarian Universalism is what we would call an orthopraxic religion instead of an orthodoxic religion, in that we care a lot more about what folks do than what they believe. But that is no less a religion for that. It is an accident of history that the dominant religion in America in 2011 is an orthodoxic religion. Those are not unusual, but not the majority of religions over the course of history.
Right.
So I would say, of course, Unitarian Universalism is a religion, and we ask things of our folks. You can believe a lot of different things and be Unitarian Universalist, but Unitarian Universalism is not ambiguous on actions. And we talked today about states of emergency. Like,
Right.
our faith is not ambiguous in saying that human life is precious and has a spark of the divine. And so policies and actions that diminish that are not a thing that we're wishy-washy about. We say that's wrong because my religion says so.
Yeah.
Right. Like for instance, I was just saying at work the other day, because we were working through this declaration of a national emergency. What does that mean? I come from a national security background, so it's really undermining what national security means and what a national emergency even means, because frequently these have actually just been used for sanctioning countries that are more often than not hurting people, and we don't want to be financially implicated in that. But what does it mean to actually declare a national emergency? And just using a little thought experiment to ask yourself, if you were president, what would you declare a national emergency for? And for me, if it had to do with the border, and this might be pushing the limits of what a national emergency would be, but just based off of everything that has been going on at the border, I would declare a national emergency and send humanitarian aid to the border, not build a wall. So maybe the nexus is the same issue, the border, but the response would be very different, because I feel as an American and as someone who cares about other human beings, or who identifies as Unitarian Universalism, where we should be taking care of each other, that is an emergency. That, when we have a couple children who have died at the border, that is an emergency, that we need to take care of people, and it doesn't matter if they're from this country or another country.
Or if they're a different religion than your own.
Right. No matter what differences that we have, ultimately we're all affected by one another, and we care about one another, and we're on this planet together, and we should be loving one another.
We're all neighbors. Every single one of us is a neighbor with somebody else.
And we're all migrants, ultimately. So as a Unitarian, I'm also very much, I love science and learning about anthropology and that kind of thing, but every human on this planet is a migrant. We have grown and evolved over time through history or prehistory, and then from there we traveled, and we're all travelers, and we're all migrants. Now, I don't want to get into like a whole policy discussion about like what do we do with the immigration system, but just vaguely and generally I would say that our laws are very antiquated and need to be updated, and we should take compassion and also economics into mind when we hopefully update those laws. And right now it's the opposite. It's chaos, it's disaster. We're not thinking about reuniting families. We're not thinking about border security in an innovative way, and we're not thinking about why people are moving in the first place and actually solving the root problem. Mm-hmm. Instead, we're just reacting out of fear and hatred and trying to build walls.
So one of the conversations I have pretty often is with folks who are very upset that the other side uses religion as a... I'm not really sure where I'm going with this. This may be a place to edit down because that sentence started and didn't really have an ending. What I'm trying to get at is this question of what to you is the role of spirituality or religious commitment in how we talk about policy, how we present ourselves in the public square. Because that, I think, is a thing, especially if we're talking about Unitarian Universalists, that we've struggled with getting a clear answer for.
I think that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe what you're trying to get at is the more conservative religious has been pushing for policy based off of their religious ideals.
Mm-hmm.
And
I hear that a lot.
How do progressives do that or not do that?
Mm-hmm.
And I obviously one community comes to mind historically and going forward, but Black church-going community has long been very spiritual and religious and used that religious motivation to impact policies. So how do other progressive or left-leaning or even centrist individuals, how would they or myself use religion? I mean, as I've already discussed, basically everything that I've ever done in my life has been because of, it all goes back to the church. Like growing up in the church, our parents met in the church. And we're married in with the Wichita, Kansas, that's where they met. And they brought us to church when we were little, and
they got us dedicated.
We've been through it all, and not to say if you grow up in a non-religious household, you can learn morality and all of those things not in a church environment. But for me, that's where I learned everything, and my parents also taught through their experience. But they were also part of the church community, so when they taught morality and values and that kind of thing, it wasn't always in the context of UUism, but everything just kind of came back to the church community, just because that's where I learned it. I'm sure that people who grew up Catholic, even if they are still devout Catholic or not Catholic anymore, they're going to kind of follow the trail back to when they first learned something like thou shalt not kill or steal, or with UUism, the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
I'd like to think that a lot of religions share the same morals, which is kind of where, in my mind, I would like policies and the political stance to be big picture kindness and compassion rather than selfishness, because I don't think any religion teaches somebody to be selfish. So I think that goes completely against anybody's religious teachings.
But I also think religious teachings, going back to the root of it all, are just speaking truth. Just speaking some kind of human truth through religion. So yeah, it doesn't matter which religion is necessarily. There are a lot of just universal truths that are taught through religion.
Mm-hmm.
Not all the time. There are some things in other religions that I can point to and say I don't think that that is a good thing, such as, you know, criminalizing certain behavior, or things that go against our scientific understanding, where I'm like, to me, you know, I'm not too keen on that. But ultimately, like most religions, like the root is kind of trying to spread that wisdom, morality, and like universal human truths down to people and create a community that values those same things. So regardless of if you're religious or not, I think that those universal truths should be reflected in our policies.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time they are, or people are trying their best to do that, but there are a lot of things in the political process that make it difficult. And there are also people who they are driven by selfishness, and they are driven by their own political motivations, where they might deliberately be doing the wrong thing, or they may really believe that they're doing the right thing, but other people can say that no, you're actually harming other people. So it's really complicated. But I would say for me that because I live the way that I do, and because of my history, that going into a policy space, like I bring my Unitarian Universalism with me in my pocket, or as part of who I am. But I also believe in separation of church and state, so I would never push for a policy as a politician to say, this is what I believe in, so you should believe it too. But just as my value system would direct me to push for a policy because I believe that it is right, but not because I believe that everyone should believe in UUism, just as I don't think it's good if, you know, there's a Christian politician who says that I believe this, so you should too, and that's their policy reasoning, versus saying this is a good policy because of these objective reasons, but they also personally believe it. Like it's a hard difference to make, but
it is. I mean, I really, I think I've gotten to a point in my life where I have a hard time imagining having a position on policy that's not informed by religious belief. I'm trying to wrap my head around what that would look like for me to be able to sort of pull those two things apart in my head. You know, particularly if we talk about some sort of capital letter policies that are in the news all the time. Like if I am preaching every Sunday that people have inherent worth and dignity, then I can't let go of that commitment when I talk about immigration policy. But here's where it gets complicated, is that if that's true for me, then that's true of other folks in my profession who I do not share beliefs with. So, and it is often the case that different religions have shared understandings of sort of root morality, but not always. The Unitarian Church of Lincoln and the Catholic Diocese of Lincoln have very, very, very different understandings of some core beliefs that lead to policy commitments.
right.
And the interesting thing is we phrase it almost the same. Unitarian Universalists will say that all people have inherent worth and dignity, and thus all people have the ability to make choices about their own bodies. That is a core commitment for us. The Catholic Church, their core commitment is that life is holy, and we should not end life even before conception. That's a faith statement as well that really bumps up against ours sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it becomes collaborative when you talk about the death penalty.
Right.
So it's kind of funny how that works.
Yeah.
But,
and so, I wonder about this. For me, it's pretty clear, separation of church and state. I know what side of that separation I'm on. I work for a church. But for our broader sort of conversation as a country, how do we say honestly, these are my commitments and they fundamentally disagree with your commitments? I still think I'm right. but we're somehow in community with each other. I think that comes back to the question of covenant and how we relate to each other across differences.
I think we find that debating with civility out with other church communities and secular communities, as well as internally as well.
Mm-hmm.
I was just talking with another young adult through the church, and we had like a moment. There's always a hesitation when you want to say something like, I feel like a little bit radical. You're like, test the waters, like, can I talk a little bit about this? Are you going to get offended? Are we on the same page here? Or can we explore it even if we have a different opinion?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the kind of conversation that I had out in the coffee hour, which I love coffee hour because you can have difficult conversations, but even internally, because I feel Unitarian Universalism is a very progressive area, but we also are like, we're progressive in that we want to think about things deeply and want to have different opinions to bounce around. But then we also have like that same goal to take care of each other and to be concerned about bigotry and other unjust things going on in the community, and how can we have that conversation productively with one another when we may disagree on like how to pursue that. But at least, in the internet space, sometimes even if you want like the same goal, but you have a different way to get there, like you can be called out as a bigot, even though like you don't feel that you're trying to achieve the same goal. So I think that there are a lot of maybe internal discussions that we have to have as a progressive faith about how to achieve equality and justice for people. And to me, it's being innovative, and it's about asking tough questions, and it's to me it's a collaborative process. So I would be more open to joining forces and working collaboratively with certain groups that other Unitarians may feel very frightened by, that they're afraid of working, or they're very angry because of the past, what's happening, our history. But I'm kind of innovative and a risk taker when it comes to like, we talk about police issues with racism and brutality and things, but I'm the kind of person like, let's go talk to the police then. Let's go work with them, because how are we going to solve the issue if we don't work with the people that are implicated in the issue? So, but then I think that other people would strongly disagree with that sentiment, as I've encountered this past year.
Well, I think the trick is that it is very difficult to be in covenant with folks who don't want to be in covenant. By what I mean by that is, especially as we talk about issues of policing, the only way to have an honest conversation with the police is if they're ready to have an honest conversation about issues of race and policing. One of the, I don't know if it was the worst, but one of the most searing moments of my career was preaching in Baltimore right after Ferguson, and and saying, as a straight white dude from a big pulpit in downtown Baltimore, that what was going on in Ferguson was wrong, but I know the Baltimore police, and I know the Baltimore police aren't like that. And then less than a year later, Freddie Gray died. And the response, particularly in Baltimore, and in a lot of places, there's a lot of work that needs to be done before we're ready to have that conversation. There's a lot of hurt that I think needs to be heard first, and honestly heard. And that's going to take some time. But to go back to the beginning, I mean, that's covenant. Covenant is is falling out of right relationship and being called back in. And sometimes you fall way out of relationship, and it takes decades, hundreds of years to be called back in.
In other moments, like in the work that we do with immigration, at the nonprofit that I work for, we have a very strong relationship with certain police chiefs, especially in rural areas, because we have like a high population of
Sure.
Undocumented immigrants who are living there. And from the police perspective, their values are our values. There is a collaborative process that we have, because to them, they don't want to have to work with ICE, because what it does to the community is it means that someone in the community can't come to the police when they have a criminal dispute, and that's not what the police want. I think most police officers want people to trust them, that they are community partners and they are trying to build trust in the communities that they serve. There are a lot of issues that need to be solved. There are a lot of discussions that need to be had, especially with race issues, but that ultimate goal for a healthy police force is that they are community partners and that they collaborate with pro-immigration nonprofits to make sure that they don't have to cause more damage in the community. They don't want to. And there's this huge dispute between police chiefs and then sheriffs who are elected and might be a little bit more Trump supporter, conservative, and so there's a lot of dispute within the own security community about servicing the communities. And those are really complex discussions. So, and I think that each police force and each individual officer is at a different stage. So obviously the ones that work with us, we have like a common understanding and they're really trying, and then there's others that we're still trying to establish connections with. There are some police forces that have had long-standing corruption and systemic issues within them, like New Orleans comes to mind, where it's not just racial issues, but usually if there's one corruption issue, there's a bunch of other corruption issues. So it's a really difficult discussion, and it's one of those things where like sometimes you're going to agree with the Catholics on one thing and disagree with them on another thing, and it's the same thing with police forces, and it's the same thing with any other organization or individual. And how can we have a productive civil conversation to make changes in the community which reflect our religious and our personal values?
And also, not every police officer has the same views as their coworkers, as or supervisor or whatever. Just like in any workplace, you aren't necessarily going to have the same religion as your coworker or your boss, but they have to get through that struggle. And the difference there is that they're very much in the public eye, Whereas if you were working in a small office, you're not getting ridicule of the public. So they're very under pressure.
Also, if you make a mistake in an office, it doesn't have the same
Impact.
I mean, you're not killing somebody
Yeah.
or injuring somebody.
We hope not.
Or creating immense fissures of distrust in the community. Yeah, I mean, it's understanding that your job is more impactful, but then also the stress of that. And I don't know, it's a really hard topic to grapple with, especially because so many people try to see it as a black and white issue, but we're really just talking about people put in tough situations.
So, to loop back to the beginning of the conversation, how do spiritual goals fit into this for you? How did we get from there to here somehow?
0 to 100.
But to loop it back, like what's the connection between where we started and where we are now?
Like Schuyler was saying earlier, it's everything that you do in your life is part of your specific spirituality. And like your beliefs, you carry those with you wherever you go, and whatever circumstances you get into, whether it's political, religious, what school you choose to go to, whatever it is, it all has to do with your own spirituality and what you want to do with it.
Yeah. What you said about like holding those beliefs with you, whether they're from a religion or a church or temple or wherever you come from, or a morality that you've discovered through your own day-to-day, those are the values that you take with you and act upon. So again, it kind of all comes to me from the church. It's like the path that I decided to take was based off of those 7 core principles that I decided that, this is the reason why I wanted to work in the global studies field and go to law school and study international human rights and even national security, to get to infuse some of those ideas with different perspectives. And to me, it all comes down to more human security, and just being a little bit more innovative about the way that we think about those issues, and then taking that education and going forward into a nonprofit sector where all we do is advocate with communities and advocate for policies that help people, or at least in our opinion, that we're helping people. And it's not just, I've heard from people, it's you're progressive nonprofit, you're just advocating because you got a bleeding heart, because you just care about people, or you want to advocate for this because of your your thought process and whatnot. But the reality is that when you talk with one of our representatives, you're talking to the thousands of children who we service in the child welfare, or the thousands of immigrants and refugees that we service in our immigration sphere, or the hundreds of thousands of people that are impacted by healthcare policies. You're talking to those people because those people have spoken to us about what those issues are. So that's why I decided to follow that career path, and I didn't want to just work a career. I wanted to really follow a vocation where I felt like I was living my UU values, and I felt fulfilled at work every day, not just pushing papers and getting work done, but that I was actually making an impact in people's lives every day that I went to work.
And a lot of those things are subconscious too. Those are subconscious decisions that you make. You carry your spirituality with you, like I said, wherever you go, and whatever choices you make vocation-wise and all that kind of stuff. So setting your goals now, or whatever point in your life, your spiritual goals are going to change. Like Oscar was saying earlier, between talking to ages 6 and age 60, you're going to have either the same or different goals when you're 6 or 60, and they might change over time, and you might come back full circle around to the same things that you were learning when you were in elementary school, and relearning those again when you enter retirement or something. And you might have more time to explore your spirituality at different points in your life, and you might need it more at different points in your life. Like if a loved one passes away, you might decide to go back and explore your spirituality more. Or if you get married, you might explore your spirituality more at that point. So goals are ever changing, and that's with everything. All sorts of goals are ever changing. So yeah,
some milestones that you have in life. And I also find a lot of introspection when my tenets and my core values are challenged, whether by other people or events. And so taking some time to reflect on that and explore it too. Like coming to church just feels rejuvenating. Like sometimes it's so hard to roll out of bed in the morning, be like, okay, I'm gonna go to church, drive through the snow, or have to overcome those barriers just to enter the sanctuary. But then every single time I've come out of a church service, I felt rejuvenated, and I never regretted coming to church. So it's always a good decision to be with people who care about you in a community that values your opinion and values your life and presence in common practice and worship.
So if you have any spiritual goals that you'd like to share with us, leave them in the comments down below. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you so much, Oscar, for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Do you have any last comments that you'd like to give?
I think you covered it. What you just said there. We would love to see you.
Okay, and next week we'll be discussing environmental goals. So this is everything from taking care of our own space. With minimalism, we'll discuss what that means and some organization techniques and why it's important to tend to your space. To big scale, taking care of the earth through our daily practice, whether that be recycling or even policy discussions such as city planning and that kind of thing. So please join us next week for environmental goals.
If you like what we're doing here, please consider becoming a supporter of the show. The Fireside Chat podcast is part of a new entertainment hub called The Fox Hollow. We'll have shows about money, gaming, music, legal comedy, and more on YouTube. And we post new Fireside Chat episodes every Monday. If you'd like to ask a question or submit a public comment to be shared on the podcast, please email us at thefoxhollowhub@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the podcast, please become a patron by donating at patreon.com/thefoxhollow, linked in the description below. You can follow us on Instagram at thefoxhollow.yt, and if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss another podcast or video.
We'll also be linking Oscar's sermons. We've got like a podcast type archive that people can go back and listen to, so we'll have that linked in the description as well. And if you haven't checked out Robinhood yet, you definitely should. Robinhood is an online investing and banking app. They give the power back to the people by not charging fees or commissions when you go to buy and sell stocks. Use this referral link to get started. share.robinhood.com/SCHUYLG7 and you will receive 1 free share of a random stock, and you have the chance to win some big name investments like Apple and Berkshire Hathaway. By using this referral code, both you, the listener, and myself will receive a random share of stock. This is a great way to give back to the show while also getting a gift in return. We post new podcasts every Monday. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next week. Bye.